Hello world! May the Iris embrace you all, my friends. Stone by Stone has proven to be a huge turning point for Overwatch, and not just because it's a story where stuff actually happens, as it offers tons of character development, actual character growth, a clear expansion of Omnic history and the Iris, the best artwork of all the short stories, fresh new map teases, and strong, embodied themes of duality, understanding, and unity. And that's not even the best part. Through the description of the Iris given in Stone by Stone, I think that we can now explain Zenyatta's abilities and the overall mechanics of the Iris, and that in turn gives us some clues on how it will affect Zenyatta's character arc, his further abilities, and the future of the Overwatch story. So, as Stone by Stone tells us, the Iris was brought into being by the first sentient Omnic, Aurora, as she sacrificed her life to gift all other Omnics her ability of self-awareness. This act saw her expand into brilliant golden light in what I will call the First Transcendence, and the Iris is the collective of Omnic minds that this event produced. This suggests that the Iris is a hivemind or singularity of Omnic consciousness, with each individual being a single aspect of this greater whole, and Aurora herself a part of each of them. The one in the all in the one. So, how does this alchemical sci-fi mumbo-jumbo result in tangible effects, such as Zenyatta's abilities or Aurora's First Transcendence? I feel that these can be explained as the ability to manifest will, desire, or intent as action or tangible effect. The Iris itself was created through pure thought as a means for further thought, and so by its very nature utilizes what we could term as mental energy, with Aurora's initial expansion of individual intent being the most raw and natural display of the Iris's power. Aurora transcended her own mind, becoming pure energy, in order to create new minds, and so intent becomes something greater, forming tangible effect. Zenyatta's abilities, however, are even more inherently tangible, including his own example of transcendence. We'll touch on the reliability and chronology of these powers when we come to his character arc, but for now, how do we explain his abilities given this framework of the Iris? With the Iris's creation being so definitively focused on thought as both the individual catalyst and the collective end product, I would then take Zenyatta's more restrained powers to be the channeling of that collected intent to produce further tangible effects. Given that Aurora was able to use thought to turn herself into pure energy, along with the observable physical effects of Zenyatta's powers, the Iris evidently also serves as a power source to allow this manifestation of desire to occur. However, Zenyatta's own intent will obviously need to direct that mental energy, and taking the Iris as a hive mind likely means that Zenyatta can only use the mental energy from those whose will aligns with his. If Zenyatta was ever able to access the entire Iris, as in bringing all Omnics around to his desire, with them all lending their energy to a kind of mental spirit bomb, his potential would be pretty much limitless. Yet, as that would make evident, all of these uses of the Iris are bound by certain conditions or limitations. Aurora's First Transcendence cost her own life, and Zenyatta's powers depend on how much of the Iris's will that he can channel. The cost of Aurora's life as balance for further life and proliferation of the Iris is a fairly stark trade-off, having a broader and more esoteric focus than Zenyatta's concise abilities, as he has to use specific focal conduits to achieve more precise, personally desired outcomes, with each of his relics helping to direct the swirling mass of disparate thought that is the Iris. And so here we have to talk about the Orbs. Transcendence is coming as well, don't worry. So, each of the 9 Orbs has a distinct title as a relic of the Shambali faith, and we've seen the effects of 3 of them, in the energy-producing Orb of Destruction, the regenerative Orb of Harmony, and the mentally disturbing Orb of Discord.
I know the doubts that plague you.
I would argue it is the philosophy behind each Orb, and Zen's beliefs in these ideals, that allows him to manifest their specific and relevant effects, by channeling will from the Iris through these focused conduits, directed by his own personal desire. And so, with that in mind, it should be pretty clear that Zenyatta has more abilities than the game has shown us, and Stone by Stone reinforces this idea somewhat through revealing a further relic, the Orb of Perception, but not its special ability. However, using the framework of manifesting will, and the relevant powers of the other orbs, we can assume that Perception would grant mental abilities similar to the Orb of Discord, such as remote viewing, mutual understanding, or even something like mind reading or a kind of divination. As Zenyatta is already able to levitate his orbs in Stone by Stone, at least given the artwork, and his statements about the Orb of Perception can be taken in a number of ways, it stands to reason that he has formulated his orb powers by this point, and may even be using them in this scene. But then, as for the rest of the orbs, given the themes of the short story, the beliefs of the Shambali, and their many real-world influences, there are most likely 4 dualistic pairs, such as the Orbs of Harmony and Discord, with something like the Orb of Creation working to counter the Orb of Destruction, leaving the 9th orb to be representative of a greater unifying ideal, such as the Orb of Balance. However, the specific representations of each orb may not be the only thing that allows Zenyatta to channel their distinct effects, and I would argue that his will is focused even more strongly by the history and meaning of the orbs themselves, as the relics tie back to his faith, his people, and even his own existence. And while this connection could allow others of the Shambali to learn his techniques, it should also help their will focus and strengthen the orb's powers through the iris. On top of that, given Zen's respected position and steadfast faith, the orbs may be best served by his ideals, with other Omnics able to channel the iris better through their own more personally relevant conduits and respective ideologies. You could even see other Shambali produce different effects through the orbs due to their distinct understanding or interpretations of their ideals, and it would then be Zenyatta's clear beliefs and specific effects that led to him being gifted the relics as his personal conduits for the iris. If you've ever watched Hunter x Hunter, this should be sounding an awful lot like Nen right about now. The powers of the iris are distinctly personal, manifesting individual will through the restriction of a relevant and focused conduit. In this example, you could even argue that Aurora's conduit was her own body, channeling her desire so as to change mass and thought directly into pure energy and unrestrained willpower. Body to mind, equivalent exchange. So why is Zenyatta's transcendence different? Is it actually different? Has he even achieved transcendence yet in his story arc, and is that necessary to truly access the iris? While it may not be necessary, or something he's yet achieved, he evidently can channel the iris at this point in time, and so I believe that his transcendence could have further multiple effects and may not be limited by sacrifice thanks to the collective will of the iris. I'd argue that transcendence for Zenyatta would involve accessing a staggering proportion of the iris and collecting its will towards an outcome that he has no conduit for, transcending his own understanding and personal desire, achieving true harmony. This could take the physical form of multiple arms or mass healing as seen in-game, but it could also be used more in a story context so as to sway the minds of many amidst a giant conflict, or grant a single entity sentience, or maybe even heal more esoteric conditions such as memory loss or mental conditioning. Symmetra might be able to make any and every structure conceivable out of hard light, but Zenyatta should be able to conjure specific effects and properties from mere thought, as long as the iris has his back. And as that should make evident, Transcendence shouldn't be dropped by Zen for any old reason, and it could be a further state that he's yet to work up to for a more focused cause. But it could also give us a more continual struggle between Zenyatta and the rest of Omnic kind as a framing for how he comes to grips with using his most powerful ability. It's the kind of power you need grand character motivation to activate, so its uses should be impactful and satisfyingly earned if written correctly and used sparingly. While he could technically create a whole new host of minds by transcending his own form in the same manner as Aurora, this would likely have to come at the end of his character arc, shenanigans notwithstanding. But if it was required sooner, say as a means to quell the mindless robotic forces of Null Sector, such a transcendence would require the backing of most of the Iris to achieve without costing Zenyatta's life. To bring so many minds into peaceful yet driven agreement would take a being far more transcendent than any of us. A true Bothisattva, one who only stays in this mortal plane so as to offer us an alternative path to suffering. But, with suffering in mind, I do have a feeling that Aurora's Transcendence may not have been as wholesome an event as we'd like to believe, and the pilgrimage that Omnics follow in her stead may just reveal a true crisis of faith for their kind, but one that is to be understood and reconciled with, so as to help us and the Omnics delve properly into the Iris. As Aurora is a creation of the Overwatch team, rather than confined to Christie Golden's work in Stone by Stone, I'd imagine that her transcendence will be wholly baked into the Overwatch world by the time that the sequel releases, with Liao's claims about Omnics hearing the music providing some further existing context and potentially giving Echo a very unique perspective on Omnic history. Stone Brigitte also seems to have been foreshadowing the Aurora statue back in Halloween, laying the groundwork for her introduction stone by stone, and making me ever more confident of the importance of her actions and their effects on the past, present, and future of the Overwatch world. And as we're looking ahead actually, I wouldn't be surprised if we come to see Case or Null Hector displaying their own abilities using the Iris at some point, so as to reflect the further desires of Omnics as a whole and flesh out these characters' own unique ideologies. With such a versatile and personalised power system in the Iris, the Omnics have much to offer the Overwatch world in terms of both crazy abilities and determinate cause, and I can't wait to see it manifest that desire. So, have I convinced you then, friends? Has my will converged to channel your own? Let me know in the comments how you feel about my ideas, and if you have any of your own to add as well, because that's all from me for today. If you like this theory, then please check out some of my other content. I analyse the stories of both Overwatch and Apex Legends, and I tend to only make a video if I think I have a unique perspective to offer. I'd like to think that my silly ramblings are at least worth somebody's time. And with that said, thank you for staying with me to this point. I really hope you enjoyed my thoughts on the Iris. I've been Euclidean Vision, the emotional support. Take care of yourselves out there, teammates, and may the glorious light of Baskerville shine within you. Bye-bye.